What's going on, everyone? It's another episode of the WVSports.com podcast. I'm Wesley Shoemaker, and as always, am joined by the one and only Keenan Cummings. A lot to talk about on today's episode, but it is crazy not to start anywhere but with the men's basketball team. The Mountaineers got their sixth quad one victory of the year, a 71-69 win over Utah. It took blood, cotton swabs, Javon Small being Javon Small, and it was a hard-fought win for the Mountaineers, who broke a 5-game home winning streak for the Utes. West Virginia helps themselves out considerably for the NCAA tournament, but they also help themselves out for Kansas City Big 12 tournament seeding next week. And now they've got one game to go against a UCF team that they should beat. And Keenan, they're in a really, really good spot. And we said about a couple weeks ago, if they can split this Utah trip, they're sitting pretty. And they have now split that Utah trip, and they are sitting pretty.
Yeah, I think West Virginia is in a markedly better place than they were 24 hours ago. I don't want to say that this UCF game doesn't matter because I'm not sure that's accurate. I think they still need to win the game, but you've taken a lot of the pressure off of that game. I just don't like – yes, I think West Virginia obviously is going to be favored in that game. You know, they're going to be at home. But you never like going into a last game, senior day, emotions are everywhere. Even though I know senior day is a little bit different now compared to what it used to be. You don't spend necessarily 4 or 5 years at a place, but you don't like relying on that, one game to decide them all type deal. So you've avoided that. You go on the road and get a big win. I know this Utah team is – overall record is kind of treading water a little bit. They have an interim coach, which we're all familiar with, and Josh Eilert. But that's a quad one win. I mean, it is. We talked about it on the last show. You go out there, they were 15-3 at home. They haven't lost there very often. So I think that you're able to go on the road and get a win. You mentioned it, quite literally blood, sweat, and tears. I think we heard at least some screaming from Andre when he got knows, but that was a hard fought win. And I out of all the recent wins, we've talked a lot about needing to get things done. They did it against Cincinnati at home. They did it against TCU at home. But this game was especially impressive to me because West Virginia fell behind early, and it looked like here we go again type deal. It looked like BYU all over again. They looked flat. They had no rhythm. They really couldn't score unless they got in transition. And then they kind of turned up the intensity a little bit on defense, got a bunch of stops in a row, started to score, took a 1-point lead into halftime, and then were able to kind of just trade blows with Utah throughout and make some plays outside another near disastrous ending sequence, which
oh my goodness,
shades of Cincinnati, giving up 5 points in 2 seconds or something.
Yeah.
But fortunately, the Utah player that did grab that pass didn't realize kind of the score or the time, so he went up immediately with the ball as opposed to kicking it out for a three. But West Virginia holds on, 71-69, gets a major win, 18-12 now, 9-10 in the Big 12. And you mentioned it, Wes. This isn't just I really don't want to say they punched their ticket because you never know what's going to happen. We talked about it last time with bid stillers and everything else that could unfold with some of these bubble teams. It was a great night for the bubble last night. And I don't mean great night for West Virginia. Had West Virginia lost it might have gotten a little bit more dicey because a lot of these bubble
that
teams,
Ohio State-Nebraska game was something. Double overtime up there in Columbus.
A lot of these bubble teams that needed to win found a way to win. Texas, North Carolina. I think Villanova is the only one that lost. And they were kind of at the bottom rung anyways.
And Nebraska, because Nebraska played another bubble team, but
somebody had to lose that game.
Yeah,
but
right.
I think that overall, an absolute home run night for West Virginia, just to get this win. West Virginia had been struggling. They were 4-8, down the stretch since they beat Iowa State. Now they had a couple impressive wins during that stretch, but I think the most telling sign to me is yes, they've let a few get away. Yes, they've been uncompetitive in some, especially in the second half. But when this team has needed to kind of buckle up and get a win, they've done it all 3 times down the stretch. Now, can they make it 4 for 4 with UCF? We'll find out, but they've done it and they've put themselves in a good spot. I think they're one of 26 teams with 6 quadrant 1 wins. They're one of only 3 that are not in the top 40 of the net. West Virginia is 48th now, but their resume kind of speaks for itself. All of their losses are quad 1, 10 of them quad 1, 2 are quad 2. They have 4 Big 12 road wins, Wes. 4. That is 2 more than West Virginia had the last 3 seasons combined. So I don't care where you're winning games on the road in the Big 12. It doesn't matter. There's been bad teams that West Virginia's lost to on the road in the past few years. So, all in all, regardless of what happened Saturday at this point, to me at least, this has been a really successful year one under Darren DeVries.
Yeah, if they win Saturday, they are stamped in, and you don't have to do, I don't think, a single thing in Kansas City.
You ain't got to show up.
Yeah, not quite. But going back to your point about Utah at home, like just looking at their schedule, their home losses included losing to St. Mary's, who's 18th in the net,
Very
Texas
good.
Tech, who is 7th in the net,
Very good.
Baylor, who is 31st in the net, and then those guys from West Virginia, the Mountaineers, who are currently 48th in the net. So a lot of teams that West Virginia kind of compares to. I mean, that St. Mary's team, you can draw the Gonzaga comparison, I guess. Like there's a lot of similarities, but like those are some good teams that have gone into that place. Like they beat Kansas, they beat Kansas State, they beat Arizona State. 3 teams that, I mean, West Virginia beat Kansas, but those Kansas State and Arizona State teams, and then they beat BYU at home. So like Utah's played well at home. They were feeling themselves. I mean, early on, Keenan, it was a little bit of a holy heck, are they ever going to miss a shot from 3? That Gabe Madsen kid came out on fire, and then even late in those last 3 or so minutes, that like he kind of out of the timeout had that big 3, and then Joe Yesufu answered back. But I mean, hat tip to Eduardo Andre. I don't know, either of us thought that he would see the floor again in the second half. And then he only finishes with, I think, like 4 points and 3 rebounds. But 2 of those rebounds came in the last 4 minutes of the game. And then 2 of those points came in the last 4 when Javon threw him that lob that then forced the Utah timeout. And so that was crucial. Javon Small, man, like I know Josh Eilert kind of gave him the shout out after the game saying he's got my player of the year vote. Like, he really deserves to get some consideration for Big 12 Player of the Year because this team is nowhere close to the NCAA tournament without him. And he's been doing it by himself since the middle of December. It's not like it's been doing this for the last month. This has been a long time coming. And then this team's tournament chances, they took a major boost. They have an 82.3% chance to make the tournament according to team rankings. If they get to one more, Keenan, I think they're in. I mean, we talked about that the other day. If they get 2-1 over their next 3. I mean, and so they can go 2-0 over their next 2 if they win Saturday. And so that would go a long way. But credit to Darren DeVries. Like, it's not easy doing what he's done. And this team struggled at times offensively. Like that stretch, it didn't come later on. It came early on against Utah, and they battled through that. Really good close to the end of the first half. I put that on our board. I was kind of wondering how they would do it because that's been a struggle. And when it's a struggle, it's obviously a focal point. They kind of actually took the lead there in the last under 4 of the first half. So good on that. Jonathan Powell scared the living heck out of everyone, I think, there late, but he hit a couple big shots.
He did have a good game.
Yeah, 4 of 7 from the field, 2 of 5 from 3, 10 points, 3 rebounds. A couple of fouls there on defense that you can definitely live without, I think, especially when it was kind of going back and forth. Like I'm not sure how you thought of it, but I know for me when I was watching, I was like, oh, it might just be a free throw fest the rest of the game, and whoever just makes one basket might win. But then Javon Small did Javon Small things, 18 points. Amani Hansberry, 12 points, 6 boards. He was in foul trouble the whole night too. So just an overall impressive victory. And
Yesufu also.
Yesufu.
I think it was one of those games where everybody contributed.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's what this team needs. How many times have we talked about just the supporting cast, the auxiliary pieces? When those guys are chipping in like this, they're much better.
Mm-hmm.
And not only did Small have 18 points, he had 7 assists. So I mean, he was just involved, and the guy just works so hard to get shots. I mean, we're to the point in the season where if he's open, I mean, I think it's going in. I mean, every time he shoots it, I'm almost surprised when he misses it. But it's really been an incredible effort out of him, and really the team as a whole. Defensively, they played really hard in this game. Ball pressure really disrupted Utah. They turned the ball over quite a bit. West Virginia struggled to kind of take advantage of that in the second half when they forced some turnovers, but early in the game, that's kind of what jump-started their offense, getting into transition, running. It was a struggle in the half court at times for West Virginia. But then you look at the final numbers and you're like, wow, they shot 46%. I don't know how that's possible. They shot over 30%. And on our message board, I think it was shared by one of our members that if West Virginia shoots over 30% from three, or 30-something percent
35,
from three,
I think 35
yeah,
it was. Yeah.
they're undefeated this season. So I think that's a telling number. And, they get a lot of open looks. It's not necessarily been an issue of getting good looks. It's just making them. And they were able to make enough last night. And really, for as big as Utah is, you expect them to win the boards. They were somewhat competitive. I think the offensive rebounds hurt them a little bit. It's been kind of a key all year that this team needs to be able to defensive rebound and get out and run. But that was an issue at times. But I think really down the stretch, West Virginia just made plays. And that hasn't always been the case, Wes. Look at Baylor, look at some of these games where, they had chances to make these plays and weren't able to do them. They did it. They did it last night. And
they fought the free throw parade too.
Yeah. It evened out a little at the end because of the intentional fouls, trying to send West Virginia to the line, extend the game. But I think it ended up 32-16. And again, one of those weird games where Utah shot more threes, West Virginia had more points in the paint, and still wasn't getting to the foul line. I don't necessarily understand how that's possible, but yet again, here we are. And some of that, again, we've talked about it. It's a product of West Virginia shooting a lot of jump shots, but sometimes you got to get some calls, man. Got to get some calls. But this team has not gotten them a lot often. You got to kind of create those yourself. And, you mentioned Andre, man. I think that's an incredible. Not only that, his screen game too. He was very effective in that, in the pick and roll type situations late, and really kind of opened some things up for West Virginia. He took a shot, man. It wasn't anything dirty, or I'm not saying anything like that, but that was a shot. I mean, it was a straight WWE style elbow right to the face. And man, you could see the damage it did, but he kept trucking, and West Virginia needed him. Monty Hansberry gave West Virginia great minutes last night, but I think it's pretty obvious at this point that they don't win that game without Andre. They need his size. They need his athleticism, especially on the defensive glass.
Because Utah's one of the bigger teams that you'll see not only in the Big 12 but in the country.
But overall, it's just a really, really good win, and in a season where it's had ups and downs. There's been times where West, remember, they were 13-4, and we were already planning for a 5 seed or a 6 seed, and then they lose.
It was never going to be that easy. We knew
then
that.
They lose 8 of 12, and you're starting to worry if you're even going to be in it. And they really did close strong, though, in a sense. The games they had to win, and I think that's a testament to Darren DeVries and this team that he's able to get them focused. Yes, every game's important. I'm not trying to say they're not, but it's hard to win at Texas Tech. It's hard to win at BYU. Yeah, you'd like to have those games, but there's certain games you have to win. Yeah, there's certain games you have to win, and all 3 of those games down this stretch run, they've won all 3 of them.
And I think that goes a long way, too, when you're going to start turning up the intensity over the next week when it gets to the Big 12 tournament, when it gets to these must-win situations. And, Keenan, I'm not sure if this is good news or bad news, depends how you look at it. The good news is that every game in Kansas City, if the season ended today, would be a quad 1 or quad 2 game for West Virginia, because the bad news is the entire Big 12 is in the top 100 of the net. That shows how good this league is. That shows the depth of this league. Colorado's at 100, Oklahoma State's at 99, so they could drop. But seriously, whoever this team plays in Kansas City, it's going to be another quad 2 or quad 1 opportunity, another chance to pad that resume. I mean, we're still a win away from talking about seeding and scenarios. But, I mean, those things start to matter because West Virginia with 6 quad 1 wins. They have 5 more than Cincinnati. They've got 1 more than BYU, 1 more than Kansas. They have the same number as Texas Tech and Iowa State. And so that's going to help them. Yes, they have 10 quad 1 losses, but, I mean, so does Baylor. So does Cincinnati. I mean, they've played a lot of quad one games because their non-conference schedule was tougher than most. But on the flip side, you get the reward of you played a tough non-conference schedule, you won some of those games, and here we are in March, and that's paying off for them.
Who would have thought, Wes, that given the way things had been unfolding, that West Virginia could end up as the 7 seed in the Big 12 tournament? If everything's chalk for the rest of the weekend, chalk as we expect it to go, West Virginia beats UCF. And if Kansas loses
at home to Arizona?
Yes, if they lose to Arizona, West Virginia is your 7 seed in the Big 12 tournament, which would be pretty beneficial.
Way more ideal than the 8 or the 9 seed, that's for sure.
Yes, you would absolutely avoid Houston for as long as possible. So we'll see how it all turns out. Obviously, some things have to go West Virginia's way, but crazy turn of events. We're thinking West Virginia might dip down even further. You lose to Utah, you're probably, a 10 seed? But here you are. You have a chance to get a bye, and that would be absolutely humongous for a team that, let's be honest, as hard as they play, I'm not sure if they have the depth to go, the whole way. So you'll take any advantage you can get, and if you get in that 7 hole or whatever it ends up being, might be the 9, you might have to play the first day, but at least now I believe as long as West Virginia beats UCF, I think they're guaranteed the 9 seed. Now, I guess things could shake out in some other ways, but I think as long as West Virginia does beat UCF, they should be in that 9 hole.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now, and it's just kind of odd because
there's too much stuff left to play out.
There's teams that haven't played their midweek game yet.
I feel like Doctor Strange trying to, look at all the
Mountaineers
scenarios.
Are 9-10 right now. Kansas State is 8-10. K-State plays tonight against Cincinnati. I'm not sure Coleman Hawkins will be playing. So let's assume they lose, they are 8-11. They would be behind WVU. West Virginia isn't currently tied with TCU. Now, I'm not sure the tiebreaker here, Keenan. I probably should have looked into this. I feel like that's bad journalism, but they are both 9-10. TCU, they play at Colorado, so that's not a gimme by any stretch of the imagination, but it's also not out of the realm of possibility that they win that. Like, I feel like that's pretty likely that they win that. So that's the biggest thing for me is figuring out that tiebreaker because, TCU's ahead of WVU as the Big 12 will sit. But if Kansas loses, they're 10-10, and then you obviously hold a tiebreaker over them. And then that would be it. So I think you're rooting for, if you're West Virginia, you're rooting for TCU to lose, Kansas to lose, and you to win. And that definitely guarantees you the 7. Beyond that, if you tie with TCU, I'm not sure if you would be the 7 or the 8. That's the only thing that I'm wondering. But that's still a top 8 seed, and that still guarantees, though, the bye.
Yeah, so that's all you need to do is if you can get into that, because Kansas State has to close at Iowa State too. So I guess
they're struggling a little bit right now.
Yeah, I guess theoretically, if Kansas State would win out, they would
hold the
alter things a little bit. But as long as
they're at Cincinnati tonight, the likelihood that they win that I don't think is truthfully too high. Like Ken Pom gives Cincinnati a 72% chance to win that game. So
I guess the scenario West Virginia is wanting to force is Baylor, West Virginia, TCU, and Kansas all 10-10. Because if that occurs, West Virginia gets your 7 seed.
They jump TCU somehow, somewhere.
I think TCU gets because it would be on round robin record.
Gotcha.
West Virginia's 2-2. TCU would be 2-3 in that scenario.
Okay.
But if TCU would lose,
then it opens the path. No matter
West Virginia would still be the 7th seed, but Kansas would be the 8th seed. Who under that scenario? Let's just say Arizona goes and beats.
I know exactly what the next sentence is that's coming out of your mouth.
Kansas is going to be a 9 seed in that scenario.
The preseason number 1 team
playing on the first day
of the Big 12 oh my goodness, like
unreal.
The amount of money they spent on that roster too, that's just crazy to me.
What if you're Kansas State right now? The amount of money they spent on their roster.
Yeah, that's true. This
The whole thing
the
is just
sunflower
nuts.
state is not sunflowering too hot. But let's transition a little bit to the football front. A couple pieces of news. We'll start away from the kind of on-field spring ball stuff. Larry Porter has been brought in reportedly from North Carolina to be the new running backs coach at WVU, and he's got a pretty strong resume, just like West Virginia has a strong resume here for the NCAA. Like he's got a pretty strong resume himself, Keno. So why don't you kind of get into him and what he brings to this coaching staff?
Yeah, no official announcement yet, but all indications are this is going to be the case. And Porter's a guy that has a ton of experience. He's been at a lot of different Power Four programs over the years, SEC, all over. Most recently at North Carolina. Yeah, I spoke to our North Carolina site, TarHeelIllustrated.com, and they are really high on him and what he was able to do there in Chapel Hill, both as a coach and a recruiter. They nominated him as kind of their coach of the year, and he's won Rivals Coach of the Year twice as a recruiter over his career. So obviously the guy knows how to recruits Atlanta, Charlotte, South Carolina, which are all areas that West Virginia heavily recruits as well. Has coached a lot of successful running backs, a lot of NFL draft picks over his career. So if you're looking for a guy that you're trying to replace Chad Scott, I think you've done it. I think that you found a guy that has not only success, in his last stop, but a lot over his career. The thing that really stuck out with me is just how much he resonates with players. That's something that Andrew really drove home a lot. He connects with players, both players and recruits, and really has a way of kind of getting them, especially in today's world with how complicated things can get, becoming a really key factor in their recruitment and developing things from there. He doesn't just recruit running backs. Now he's involved with all running backs. At least he was at North Carolina, and I assume he'll do that here. But he recruits other positions as well, brought in a lot of talent in Chapel Hill, as well as stops at LSU and, down the board. So he's been a lot of places and had a lot of success. So if you're looking, I thought it was funny. Rich said he had some guys in mind and a lot of really good coaches. They were going to get a good coach. Well, if Porter is indeed the pick, which we have no reason to believe it isn't going to be, I think he hit a home run.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing that you're able to see if you want to compare Chad Scott and Porter is that relatability to this kind of younger generation, the way the guys are kind of different now in terms of what they want, how they want to be treated. I know Rich has talked about that, how he's going to be the same guy, but at some point someone's got to play good cop in that building, right? And so I think Porter will do that, certainly. But that's also similar to what Chad Scott was. He was kind of that figure who was very relatable to these guys, who they liked as a person and kind of as that mentor role more than also just the on-field coaching aspect. But everything screams that it's going to be a good fit, that it's going to work. And so that's obviously a positive there. And we'll learn more about that once it becomes, and if it becomes official. But kind of moving on to the on-field stuff, you were able to see a glimpse of practice yesterday, which was the first time we've seen practice in this new regime, the second go around. So what were some of your takeaways or things you saw, or just kind of overall thoughts on that? And then also Rich Rod had another presser yesterday, and so we'll get into that after that.
Yeah, I think now keep in mind it was around 10 minutes or so it wasn't a ton, but anything's better than nothing is the way I have always kind of looked at this. So the one thing that was absolutely noticeable to me from the start, and this isn't a knock on what was happening before or saying what's happening now is right, but it was very different in tempo, different in intensity, just everything. It's all go, 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 go. Everything that Rich has talked about in his press conferences, you could see it unfold, even in a brief glimpse in practice. He was upset at one point that the second team was not already starting a drill on the other end, while the first team, or whatever, the first group, I don't want to call it teams, because truthfully, when you go to these practices, guys, they're mixing in players in and out with different lineups, and it's really kind of just get as many players, as many reps as possible. But it just speaks to just, coaches getting after guys, wanting the running backs to run harder, I thought Rodney Gallagher had a nice catch, from Nico Markiel. The couple other guys made some nice plays too, but it really they were lining up and just trying to run things fast. And the coaches were all over him. And I thought that was the biggest difference. Didn't really get a chance to really study a lot of things that were going on, trying to take notes and pictures and everything else that you got to do in that glimpse. But that was the number one thing to me. Everybody seemed to be on the same page. Everybody was kind of getting after guys, and the players seemed to be having fun out there too. Seemed to be enjoying the pace and kind of how things were going. So I'm really interested to see, if we get more practice access, what kind of things we see, how it unfolds. But pretty good for a first glimpse. It gave you a real idea of what Rodriguez and crew want to accomplish. It's one thing to hear him say, we like going fast, we like doing things at a certain tempo, but then you see it. He's right. He does not want dead time. He does not want guys standing around. He wants people moving, going through drills, getting reps. And he said it yesterday in his press conference. They want to accomplish as much in a 2-hour practice as some teams do in a 5-hour practice. And I can see that now after being there and being able to kind of take it all in and get a feel for, how they want to go about things.
Yeah, and I think that's a pretty good kind of segue into his press conference, because what has he been talking about every single time? It's, we're trying to teach these guys how to practice, and that there's guys that are still learning how to practice, because practicing one way is not practicing the Rich Rodriguez way. And I think that's a kind of big difference, is that he wants to go fast no matter what he's doing, whether it's offense or defense, special teams. Like, he wants to challenge his guys with that. And it's not easy. It's not an easy adjustment for everyone. And it takes time to kind of acclimate that full on sense of understanding between everyone that's on the field, because there's a lot of moving parts to these things, as we both know. And it's still a work in progress for everyone involved. One thing that kind of stood out to me too is, from what he had to say yesterday, is, Rodney Gallagher staying on the offensive side of the ball. Shocker, shocker. But also the offensive line, and how they're going to want to kind of go, how the defense is doing a lot of things, which Rich did talk about early on, how Zach Alley was challenging these guys, and how that's then challenging the offense as well to kind of pick up on things early on, because you're seeing a multitude of looks.
Yeah, I think yesterday too, something that I thought was kind of interesting too, is Rich talked about kind of, how his, I guess, hard edge thing came about, and we're writing about that.
Yeah.
We'll have something on that on the site, so I don't want to get too much into it, but I thought that was pretty cool. Pretty interesting to me. I think the theme of this is every day is a little bit up and a little bit down. I think he's going to tie in the toughness, hard edge, whatever you want to call it, into most things they do, because that's how they want to be defined. So you're going to have some of that every day too. But really, we're to the point now where you're starting to get a feel, at least they are starting to get a feel for what certain guys can do. And then you can start to build things out from there. So I do think, as the pads are on more days, it's only been 2 days, guys, in pads. So that's going to continue to develop. And then once even after spring is complete, the summer is what really is going to, and then fall camp, we're really going to get an idea of what this roster has. So I do think it's been telling, though. Almost every press conference, whether asked about it or not, he's made mention of the 105 number and how he does not want to cut guys. He wants to grandfather guys in, and he doesn't like that at all. He doesn't think it's fair. And I think he's angling as hard as he can to try to, kind of keep guys on the roster, because it's not their fault if it goes to this.
Yeah, and I think too, though, that there's going to be some serious consequences of that in terms of how rosters are constructed, because it's not just West Virginia that's going to have to cut down. Everyone's going to have to cut down. So that means there's going to be an influx of guys in the transfer portal, and then guys who were already in the portal are now going to be like it's going to cause
Better start picking a school now.
Seriously. But and then for someone like Rodriguez and Rich and staff, who is still figuring out this roster, like, there's going to be more guys to choose from if this 105 number is a full go, and it's strictly 105, and because there's going to be so many guys on every team that are going to then therefore hit the portal. And I would bet there's some cases that dudes who are not in the top 105 on one team could be the top 105 on another team, or their role could be in the top 105 on another team. So it's just going to be just chaos city. We are a month out from the spring activity. I guess we should call it the spring showcase.
Get it right.
Yeah, get it right. But yeah, like it's starting to sneak up on us, I guess. I feel like the last couple of weeks have somewhat flown by just with everything going on. I mean, we're in the thick of that crossover season between basketball and then spring football, as well as a little bit of baseball going on. Speaking of them, they're still undefeated.
Yep. Yes,
Who knows
they are.
what will happen?
I think they might make it. They might make it to the Big 12
to next weekend. Yeah.
You might be right. But I love how I say you might be right when I'm the one that said that. But
yeah.
I think that I do want to mention this too. I don't think this is a surprise. I wrote this in the 3-2-1 as my prediction really before spring even started. But if you're hoping that Rich Rodriguez is going to roll out and tell you the starting quarterback tomorrow, the end of spring, summer, you're wishing on a star, buddy. He made it pretty clear yesterday that why would they? Yeah, I think he even joked. He joked, but I'm not sure he was really joking that they'll let us know 1 minute before kickoff of the regular season. I think he was being pretty serious. Now, I do think if there is an obvious separation at that point, it's just kind of like Neil used to say, it's obvious. What's the point of trying to deny it? But I think they're going to try to force competition as long as possible. So all you people out there wondering who's going to be the starting quarterback, buckle up, guys, because this is going to be a rocky offseason for you.
Yeah, game is on August 30th. I would say let's not worry about that till August 27th. I feel like that might be a good time to really start wondering who would be the starter because we really don't know. And the way he words things with this quarterback conversation is seriously in terms of sounds like he wants to have the option to play multiple guys in the same game, and not by it's a blowout, but by it's a design that way. And I'm not sure if that's going to work. Like, I don't think anyone really knows, but by the sound of it, it sounds like he wants to have multiple quarterbacks play in each game.
He at least wants the option to have it.
Yeah,
I mean,
unless they have a clear-cut number one. Like, I feel like if it's like a 1A, 1B type deal, you're really going to probably see both.
He's done that before. I mean, Pat White and Adam Bednarik definitely played. I know obviously we all know how that turned out, but I think that he means it. He wants 3-4 guys that he feels he can win with. And while that might lead to a starter, they want to feel comfortable with what they do on offense because they run the quarterback. They're not bashful about that. They've made it quite clear. They want to be in a situation where West Virginia wasn't, a few years back when Will Grier got hurt and it was a nightmare. They want guys that can step in and run the offense and do it effectively. So I think that is going to be a focus, going to be a key. And how do you get that, Wes? You force competition. How do you force competition, Wes? You leave that depth chart wide open.
And that depth chart is going to stay wide open until August 30th at 3:29 or 6:29, whatever time that kickoff is. It's gonna be held. So, anything else from you before we wrap this thing up?
I think we do need to mention the fact that the UCF game is senior day, and shout out to all the seniors. Now, Tucker will be back, but all the other guys that have played a big role this year, I think that it's a sellout. So I think that they're going to get the credit and the respect and, what they deserve, because first years are tough anywhere, especially with what's unfolded this year for West Virginia. And those guys they've just played so hard, every time. They haven't been perfect by any means. They've all had instances where they've struggled, but who doesn't? That's part of being a human. But you look at the other night, for example, last night, like look at the role the seniors played. And
I mean,
this team would not be 18-12 without those guys. So I definitely think they deserve a warm reception, and I hope the Coliseum's rocking for them.
Yeah, Eduardo Andre, Joe Yesufu, Toby Okani, Javon Small, Jake Auer, Harris Elizavich. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I wish I was better at.
I thought that was pretty good. I'm going to go with that.
Thank you. Yeah, Tucker too, but I walks because he's coming back by all inclinations. But I mean, there's some dudes that have really like I know Javon Small. I know all these guys have really only been here for 1 year, but I bet there's some serious like ovation for Javon and what he's really given this team. I mean, for Eduardo Andre, like for all these guys, like they've played hard, and I think that's what so many people when they made this hire wanted is that they wanted to see a team that was playing hard. And think how much this thing has changed in 365 days. It was about this time last year that this team was going to Kansas City with 9 wins and craziness and an interim coach and a off season of question marks. And now we could be preparing to talk NCAA tournament if they get this thing done on Saturday, Keenan.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that was the ultimate goal this year if you're West Virginia. And I think long-term view, you take out all the Iowa talk and all the stuff that's been going on all around, but Darren DeVries long-term, I firmly believe this. Now, I don't think you find a player like Javon Small every day, and I'm not even trying to say you can, but I think at least depth-wise, this will probably be the worst team he has at West Virginia, barring unforeseen circumstances like what unfolded this year. They have already got look at what they're set to return next year if everybody comes back. Look at the incoming freshman class. They're all like very highly rated, very productive players. So I think that if you're going to get West Virginia, this is probably the year because you get Tucker back and the base to build around him with some very impressive freshmen. You could be running this back another trip to the NCAA tournament next year if they find a point guard and maybe one other player in the transfer portal, which obviously DeVries has shown the ability to do.
Yeah, and I think that NIL is still obviously going to be there. It's a lot easier to give NIL money when you know that there's going to be a track record for success, and that success has certainly come this year. But yeah, I mean, if this team has had any scoring outside of Javon Small, we would be saying this team is a threat in Kansas City or a threat, like, you know what I'm saying? And so I think that's something that is going to be lessons learned from this year, and we'll get to this whenever this thing wraps up, is that you just never know when something could happen, and having scoring is never a bad thing. But the way this team has played defensively is obviously super impressive. I hope they get a well-deserved recognition on Saturday. I bet it's going to be one of those kind of great kind of feel-good atmospheres, and hopefully they deliver with a win because they truthfully should and kind of need to.
Yeah. Yep. Well said.
Thank you. So we will wrap this thing up. Well said. We will wrap this thing up. I am Wesley Shoemaker, joined by Keenan Cummings. If you made it this far, we appreciate you listening. And this was the WestVirginiaSports.com podcast.